Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Miguron Moyarl with the crossbar lock. I think this is my favorite Miguron budget knife that they have ever produced. And I think it currently is one of the best budget options out there, like period. But it has the potential to really be something spectacular, and there's a couple of things I gotta nitpick. But I do very much love this knife, and spoiler alert, I'm gonna recommend it. It's not expensive, it is beautifully ergonomic, it's got wonderful materials. Yes, we're gonna talk about the blade steel and the HRC. Yeah, it's just a really, really good design. And the liner lock version, which is even less expensive, I've already reviewed that. You can also check that knife out for $10 less. We're going to talk about the price on this one. Just a really, really good offering from Miguron. There's a lot to love here. But when you get this close to perfect, that's a highly subjective word. When you get this close, we have to nitpick the things that are keeping it from being absolutely perfect. Thank you so much to Miguron for sending this knife in for me to take a look at. They gave me 2 of these. I will probably keep one and give the other one away. A lot of times that's how it works. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This and every variant that you can find will be linked right down in the description, so you guys can pick this up if you want to. Let's go ahead and measure it. It's the same as the other. I'm going to speed through the specs here because this is the same as the other Moyarl. It's just got a crossbar lock. 7.5 inches blade length is 3 1/4. Cutting edge is about 2.8 inches, thanks to a large forward choil. Let's do some size comparisons. I've actually got a knife out here that's next up on the review block, and I might as well compare them because this is the also very popular Miguron Mini, or the smaller Valona, which, hey, Miguron, put a crossbar lock on this guy too. Come on, everybody wants it. You know you're going to do it. Just do it. So there it is up against the smaller Valona. Let's do it up against some more common and popular knives. Any custom skills you see in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. So up against the AD10 and the AD20.5, we can see here the Moyarl is extremely similar in terms of overall length, height, and ergonomic profiling to the AD20.5. How about up against the Spyderco? Oh, I didn't get the PM2 out. There we go. The Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Parrot 3. This guy is definitely a lot closer in size to the Parrot 3. Again, ergonomic profile, very, very similar. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. Alrighty. How's the action? Well, I am happy to say you've pretty much already seen it. Miguron makes a good crossbar lock. Man, that thing is very easy to manipulate, very smooth, no stickiness. It's also solid enough to withstand the Metal Complex triple tap, which is all that I require of this stuff. I like that they allowed for almost maximum access to the opening hole here. There are a few things that really grind my gears, and you guys know I make that known. Well, one thing that I find exceedingly stupid is when companies provide a hole as a means of deployment, and then they cover the hole up with the scales, or they cover it up partially. Like, what do you expect this to do? Miguron has created an ergonomic profile and, positioned the hole in a way that allows you to actually manipulate the knife. And it works really well with a liner lock. It works just as well, if not, a little better with the crossbar lock. And if you're wondering, like, why, what do you think? Like, which is the better lock? Honestly, I think the crossbar lock is better in terms of solidity and dependability, right? If you find yourself, obviously we shouldn't be banging on the back of the spine. Like, that's not knife use. If you're like, oh yeah, I do that all the time, that's just part of my everyday, you're doing it wrong. It's not, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't know what it is you're doing, but we don't need to put pressure here. In some situations, you can be cutting into something that is dense enough to where the blade gets a little bit stuck. This has happened to me before. It's why I use this example. And as you wrench the blade back out, you're putting pressure on that spine. And as long as the lock is secure, there's no danger of the lock disengaging and the knife folding up on your hands. But if the lock is not secure, that can happen. So this caveman behavior, that is not normal knife use, right? A knife is not a hammer. The spine of your blade is not a hammer. That's a dumb thing to do. But we test it to make sure that the lock is strong enough to hold up. And I find that while liner locks are usually more than dependable enough under normal circumstances, that the crossbar lock is just better. Really, though, the benefit of a crossbar lock is that it can be manipulated in an ambidextrous way, which is why this brings me to my first complaint. This is a real head scratcher. Why would you put an ambidextrous locking system on a knife and then only allow for the pocket clip to be mounted on one side? And before people go down in the comments say, well, I just turn it over and then put it in the pocket like this. That's not, you shouldn't carry the knife like part of the safety, for carrying a knife in the appropriate side. Like for people who don't think there's an appropriate position of the blade and, pocket clip in terms of right or left-handed carry. There is. Up against the back seam, right, where the blade is pinned up against the back seam. Because that way, it cannot open. I mean, it's very unlikely it's going to open anyway. Under normal circumstances, it's almost impossible. But, all it takes is one time, right? If the blade is pinned, this is tip up, right-handed, pinned up against the back seam. You take this and you put it in your pocket like this, you'll be okay. That's how my brother likes to carry his pocket knife, which absolutely drives me insane. But the one time that something happens, you get bumped hard enough, the thing opens up in your pocket, guess what? You got a freaking tip and a razor-sharp edge just waiting to eat your hand, right? It can eat it bad enough that the stitches will cost substantially more than the pocket knife did. So, no, I don't think flipping it over is the right answer. I think the right answer is, Miguron, mill the holes for lefties. What are you doing? Anytime you have a crossbar lock, any company, if you have a crossbar lock that's an ambidextrous locking system, you had better make sure that there are mounting holes for right and left-handed carry. That's just common sense. So, yeah. But okay, if you're right-handed, it's not a problem. If you're left-handed, it might be a problem. Or if you're right-handed and you like to carry it in your left-hand pocket, then it's a problem, right? So just let's consider who should be, I guess, frustrated with it. But as a reviewer, that is an annoying thing to see. The action is very, very good, though, to conclude. Very good, very easy to manipulate, and the tension on the Omega Springs is just fine. Let's do carry profile. I said we're going to speed through this. We're already 7 minutes in. We'll just speed through this part. A little bit thicker than the Spyderco Para 3, but we do have contouring, which is really nice and makes this a joy to hold. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. It's really just about the same as the Para 3 in terms of length, slightly shorter. Hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use in this channel or the pinned comment. Sorry, I should have had that ready to go. So for the pivot and body screws, I'm almost certain everything is a T8. Yeah, we got T8 and we got T8 here. Everything's T8. Even the pocket clip screws are T8, which is nice because knives that utilize crossbar locks are certainly able to be taken apart, but they're not quite as easy as a liner lock, right? It's possible, just a little bit of patience, but just be prepared for that. At least getting into the knife, getting into the internals is fairly easy because, well, it's very easy because we have T8 hardware and just a couple of screws on each side. So as long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's measure blade stock thickness here, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes and actually wrap this up pretty quick because there's not a lot to say here. The blade stock thickness is coming in at about 125 thousandths, which is about what I expected. Okay. Let's move on to the meat and potatoes. What is different? What are we going to talk about here? So one thing that I don't think that I covered on the original Moyarl is, it's 14C28N, which is a very, very well-balanced composition. I think the geometry of the blade is accentuating the properties of 14C28N pretty well. I think the geometry is good. It's a nice slicing knife. This obviously isn't a knife that we need to take out and pound through, freaking blocks of wood or we're not like batoning with something like this. That's silly. We're just doing cutting, right? But 14C28N is a very balanced composition. It's got really, really great toughness considering its potential for edge retention and its corrosion resistance. It's just such a nice balance, right? Now, a lot of people have gone to Miguron's website and they've gone to the hardness. They've looked it up and, oh God, 57 to 59. Terrible. Here's the problem. The problem is that we have way too many people, even people who know better, right? You know better. You know that it's not just a static thing. You know that every composition has an optimal range. So, for example, ZDP, that's the one I like to use a lot. ZDP 189 has a very different optimal range than 1095 because the idea or the purpose of the composition is very different. Hardening ZDP up to 67, 68 results in a very specific type of steel with very specific levels of performance. And you will not get the same performance by heat treating 1095 up to 67 or 68. It will not perform the same way because the composition is made up of different things. It's got a different cake mix. What's happened here is we have a lot of people who just don't know, automatically assuming that anything that is 60 or higher is good and anything that is 59 or lower is bad. And M390 has created this delusion. Now, when it comes to 14C28N, Sandvik actually says that it performs best. It has this massive range, which it also, I think, is to the benefit of 14C28N. It has this massive optimal range of 55 to 61 or 62. I think it's legitimately 55 to 62. That is a much wider range than what we normally see. I think MagnaCut, for example, has a wide optimal range. 14C28N is much wider. Obviously, if you're on the back end of that, you're not going to get nearly the edge retention, but you'll definitely get amazing toughness. Now, we don't need that much toughness in a pocket knife like this, right? So maybe if you're like, if you do a fixed blade and it's 14C28N, you're going to pound the crap out of it. Well, maybe you'd want it on the back end of that. But maybe for a pocket knife, I would prefer that it's a little bit hard. 14C28N, even when it's on the harder end, is really not all that difficult to sharpen. So I think I would prefer it a bit higher. So is 57 to 59 okay for this knife? No matter how well I explain this, we're still going to get people who aggressively skip over everything that I said and just say it's too soft. And if you ask them to elaborate on that, they won't really, right? But the truth is, that's actually just fine. I would prefer to see it slightly better. I would prefer to see their range be like 59 or so, like right in there, 59, 60. I think that'd be cool. But is it bad? Like, is this a soft heat treatment? Is it the wrong heat treatment at 57 to 59? No, it is not, because Sandvik, the company who creates the steel, has determined that the optimal range for this steel is 55 to 62, right? This isn't like Joe from the parts department, right, who on the weekends reads a lot on Google and has determined that he is a professional on knives. No, it's not him saying, it's Sandvik, right? So I saw that and I was like, ooh, I think that's a little low. And then I realized I didn't know what the optimal range was for 14C28N. So I looked and it turns out it's huge. So, we can't help it. We're going to see those numbers, and then the knee-jerk reaction is you're going to be like, it's a little bit low, right? But considering, this is just my 2 cents, it's fine, and you should not, that should not be something that keeps you from buying the knife. But given the fact that this is not an apparatus that needs to be, exceedingly good in the toughness department, we don't need it to be on the lower end. I think it should be on the higher end. Maybe if they bump their range to 58 to 60, I think that might be where people would be okay with it, right? But it does not have the same optimal range as M390. It's not the same thing. So I guess think however you want to about that, but I wanted to address it because I've heard like people are like, oh my gosh, can you believe, Miguron is heat treating these 14C28N blades and it's so soft. It isn't. It's just in that high 50s area where people automatically assume that that's a bad heat treat. It depends on composition. Okay, anyways, rant over. All I've done is just ignite the arguments in the comment section, but I wanted to get that information out there, right? So there you go. But yeah, things that bother me about this, because it's such a good profile, it's such a very Spyderco-esque profile. The choke up position is fantastic. Really needing some jimping up here, but a good slicey profile, a good blade profile, a handsome blade profile. I love the contouring here. It's so comfortable. Really everything I liked about the liner lock version, I love about the crossbar lock version. We just like, come on now. You need to mount the pocket clip for left-handed carry. It's also curiously approaching a shallow carry, and it is that way because this screw absolutely had to be right there for some reason. It doesn't need to be there, Miguron. Or just move the pocket clip over a little bit. Like, why does this screw absolutely have to be right there? It doesn't need to be. You can move this back here, right? We can move the backspacer back, right? We can have this pocket, the backspacer is super long. You can have this screw up here and this screw over here. There's no lanyard hole. Who cares, right? But if you just love shallow carry, then fine. This isn't really shallow carry. It's kind of a medium depth, right? I like it to carry a little bit deeper, but my biggest problem is if the pocket clip has to be this length, then it's pushed past this 50% line because this screw has to be right here for some reason. So when you grip the knife in the standard grip, that's what you feel is the pocket clip right here in your hand, which is not, I'm not a fan of that. I like clips to be a little shorter and I like them to be tucked up towards the butt end of the knife so that it's more right around here, which is a much more comfortable way to hold the knife. If you choke up on the knife, it's not quite as bad, but I think this whole thing would be made better if the pocket clip would just move back. It's great that it's titanium. I love that. I think that's a nice touch, right? In fact, before I say that, Miguron always does the titanium pocket clips, which is one of those benefits there. But yeah, I love that. And there's nothing wrong with the style of the pocket clip or anything. It's another slap in the face of the freaking pocket clip is perfectly symmetrical, meaning if we had the holes to the other side, you could flip it over. Like they did everything they needed to do except drill out the holes. It's just kind of silly, So, yeah, we need to do that. I mean, outside of that, it really is good. You can tell that I'm nitpicking this because I love the Moyarl. I think this is an excellent knife, right? If you're right-handed, right, you understand the whole optimal range of various compositions thing, right? And you don't care about the pocket clip length or anything like that. If you just, if you're good on all those things, then holy moly, you're going to love this knife. You are absolutely going to love it. As it sits, and by the way, lockup is completely and totally solid. There's no stick. There's no pivot lash. It's nice and smooth in here. Right, D10 is about where you'd want it. Centering is really, really perfect. It's a great knife. It's just so close to being like absolutely ideal. And by the way, they have various versions of this aesthetically that have like the PVD coatings, which I think look really, really good. But that's another reason to bump the hardness just a little bit more because the PVD coatings bring the hardness down a little bit. So we're really getting down into this should probably be a fixed blade if it's going to be that soft kind of thing there. But yeah, I like all the different variations that you can pick up. And it really is just a super comfortable knife. But, come on, finish off the final steps here. Make this a truly perfect knife, at least according to me, what I want. Make it the way I want it to be, right? Now, it's fine the way if you're okay with the things that I've criticized, if those things don't bother you, you're going to love this knife. And even as it is with the complaints, it's still extremely recommendable. This version is $10 more curiously than the liner lock version. I understand we do the crossbar lock that makes it a bit more complicated. It's probably a little bit more cost on their end, but could they have done it for $55? Probably. I really can't be bothered with that price tag because it's such a good build. The contoured micarta, right? The titanium pocket clip, the crossbar lock, 14C28N. Even at $59 it's a really, really good deal. All in all, I still recommend this knife. It's disappointing to see a couple of little things that are actually not that little. They're kind of big things, like not be perfect. But anyways, very good knife. Thank you so much to Miguron for sending this in. Links in the description for this guy so you guys can check it out. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.